Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the HARLAND WOLFF Group Holdings PLC shareholder briefing. Throughout this recorded briefing, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and we'll publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd now like to hand over to Interim Executive Chair, Russell Downs. Good morning.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'll make some introductions in a minute, but I just want to emphasize the purpose of this meeting for the shareholders in the company. As I said at the outset of my appointment, it was important that I engage with all stakeholders across the HARLAND and WOLFF landscape, and I've certainly endeavored to do that. I have engaged bilaterally with a small number of shareholders in the business, but this forum that we're holding today has been on my mind to do for some time. It's just trying to find the right time to do it. Attending today are a number of shareholders who've joined us remotely. I do expect that this is an open meeting, so there may be other people listening in who aren't shareholders but are otherwise stakeholders interested in the business. And then, of course, there's my team around the table. Alan Fort, my co-director, Ben Murray, Chief of Staff, Ran Oren, Interim CFO, and Alison Beveridge, Interim General Counsel. I want to emphasize that this is an informal meeting. It's not convened under the Companies Act. There's no business to be conducted, no resolutions to be passed. For me, it's important that it's an opportunity for us to give you an update and answer the questions that you put to us ahead of this meeting, and no doubt during this session as well. As I say, it's important that there is a forum for the shareholder community to ask the board and for the board to give questions where it is able to do so. I would expect I will talk for about 20 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions after that, but we'll certainly draw a close within 45 minutes. For me, HARLAND and WOLFF, of course, has got to be at the heart of this discussion. In thinking where to begin to describe this amazing company, do you start with the Titanic? Do you start with those cranes over the Belfast landscape? But for me, I can only really start in one place. And that's with four names and four numbers: Appledore, 2000, Arnish, 1700, Belfast, 35,000, and Methil, 2,500. Those are the headcounts in each of our yards at their peak. Over 40,000 people working, producing ships and other North Sea equipment of real significance for the UK and wider economy. Of course, the business has had some bad times. Whilst it's not possible to identify what the lowest headcount in each of those yards has been, I suspect that it's zero, or if certainly wouldn't on an aggregate basis exceed 100 heads. Some change over time. Today, we have 200 people working in Appledore, 150 working in Arnish, and 600 in Belfast, and 200 in Methil. That's just over 1,100 jobs. The question is, therefore, what will that labour force be in 5 years' time? Will the yards flourish as we hope they will under new ownership, delivering potentially 15 million hours in a re-emerging business with a stable government, a mature multi-site shipbuilder and renewables fabricator? For us, we fully believe this result, to achieve that objective, will be the best for all of the group stakeholders. And it has been Alan's and my strategy that securing that as the best outcome will be the best we can achieve available in the circumstances for the group as a whole. That doesn't mean that we can please everyone all of the time. We've had to make hard choices. Our stakeholders have seen that firstly with the Scilly ferries, the communities impacted both on the island and on the mainland, our suppliers for that business who will shortly receive notification of the company's insolvency, and a small but truly dedicated group of people who put everything into trying to launch that business despite the challenges. But within the businesses, within our yards, we've also faced difficulties. We took the hard decision not to continue the appointment of apprentices in one of our yards, and clearly that's had an impact on those affected and the community there. We took a difficult decision to not buy steel that we needed to for one of our contracts, for the customer who we had to tell they wouldn't be receiving their order, and of course for the teams and unions at the sites who continued to work in the knowledge that the work would dry up quicker than they might have expected. But moving to the stakeholders of our PLC company, the 70 people who I had to tell on Monday morning that their employment with the business would come to an end far sooner than they might have thought, many of whom had actually only joined the business within the last 12 months. They were all individually and collectively so committed to see the Harland & Wolff brand succeed. Also within the PLC, we've had an impact for our creditors, the landlord, other advisors, financial and legal, and those counterparties who the PLC has given a guarantee to. And of course, you, our shareholders, who will all move into the insolvency of the PLC entity with the uncertainty that brings. But all of those decisions were driven by Alan and me to secure the best outcome we could for the business as a whole. And that centers around finding a way to maximize the future employment for the yards I've talked about. I would note that the business has been subject to considerable interest over the last week. Under my leadership, the business hasn't engaged with any journalists since my appointment. Team members, I note, have been approached by some shareholders for comment, and there's been periodic speculation on our future, peaking at the end of last week as our plans for dealing with most sensitively with the PLC team broke ahead of our preferred timing. And that's why I commented to various papers over the weekend to preempt that. I would say in terms of where we are now, I do ask for respect and professionalism on media platforms for my team as they approach the uncertainties ahead, and candidly, low-grade and unhelpful comments should be strongly discouraged. I want to move to talk about the update that I gave in the RNS, and I'm not going to repeat that in any great detail. I just want to draw out two areas. Firstly, around trading, where we talked about the overdue creditors. I do want to emphasize that the business has been loss-making, and that's recorded in the previous filed financials, which I'll highlight in a second. But I do emphasize that there was no other avenue of funding available to the directors when Alan and I came into office. And trading from that moment has been challenging, made more so by the company's, the government's decision to turn down the company's request under its UKEF facility, and the absence of any other source of financing to take the business forward. With Alan's and my appointment, we were able to secure funding from our secured creditor, and that funding has been used and is continuing to be used to support the business against the backdrop of the decisions that I've talked about. I would bring out, though, that as a business, we were late on payment to our landlords, including our lease yards, and one of those was at a critical point. We were late on payment to a number of our key suppliers, and we had broken our payment plans with many others as well. And that has impaired the trust and confidence needed in any business relationship. We and the wider team have worked hard to endeavour to restore that trust, and we've been open in our commitments to our suppliers and elsewhere, and we followed through on the payment plans that we've agreed with our counterparties, and we continue to do so. In terms of funding, we continue to explore various routes and pathways to secure funding for October, and of course that remains a critical objective. Moving to the Rothschilds process. That process is obviously reaching a key milestone. As we said at the outset, we would expect progress towards the end of September, and indeed that's where we are heading towards. I am content with the engagement we've had with interested parties, and at this point I'm sure you will appreciate that I'm unable to say more other than saying that I'm content that the process is competitive, and I will provide an update when it's appropriate to do so. I'm now going to turn to some of the questions which have already come in, and then as further questions come in, I will address those as well. And I'll take these in order that they've been submitted. The first question: why didn't the board of directors engage with Australian billionaire Clive Palmer? Might he have provided tens of millions of pounds in affordable loan? It's hard to make any comment on any one interested party who expressed an interest privately or indeed publicly. As everyone I think is well aware, we have appointed Rothschilds & Co to assist us, and we have directed all interested parties and continue to do so to Rothschilds & Co so that they can explore that interest. The second question: how can you say that the 4 yards have value, but the holding company with shareholders has no value? HARLAND & WOLFF currently has circa 120 million of debt and circa 20, I think that's million in shares, listed price of 8p. How can you sell 4 assets for exactly the value of the credit debt to pay creditors back, but state there is no money to pay shareholders who own the 4 yards? 150 million will pay everyone's interest back. What happens if someone offers 200 million? How can you sell 4 assets and then claim the shareholders' assets are worthless? Clearly, there's a lot to address in that question. I would begin by just talking about the company, the PLC entity itself, which is insolvent, and that is in accordance with the statutory definition of insolvency, which has 2 aspects. One, a balance sheet where it's been insolvent based on its filed published accounts, and 2, a cash flow basis where the PLC is now unable to pay its debts as they fall due. With the company moving into administration, it's the administrators who will ultimately determine what recoveries might be available within the company, having realized its assets. It would have to work through what is the claim of the secured creditor, whether it's 120 million or more, how much is owed to unsecured creditors, and I think in the last published accounts there was a figure of about 2 million there. I don't know what the latest number for that is, and of course shareholders. In terms of the value of the group and the yards, that will be determined in accordance with the Rothschilds process. As I've said, I'm content that it is a competitive process, and therefore we will all have to wait and see what value is ultimately derived from that process. In your RNS statement, you said you would have facilitated an EGM if one was requested. An EGM was requested and you ignored it. Why? We did receive a request on the 9th of August from a shareholder submitting paperwork in respect of a number of shareholders. However, our legal advisors advised us that the formal legal requirements had not been satisfied to validly requisition an EGM. And so compliance with the Companies Act requirements had not been met. We tried to set out the steps that the shareholders needed to follow, and we also invited the shareholders to provide the form of resolution they would like circulated for approval so that we could get the wheels in motion. The board remained open to requisitioning an EGM, and we have had our lawyers' offices on standby to hold that event. And I do say that I have engaged bilaterally with a number of shareholders who have made contact with me. But I do hope that this forum today provides an opportunity to engage with the shareholder community. The next question: what assessment did you make of the possibility of using the order book to provide security for the issuing of convertible loan notes to fund operations? We didn't consider that fundamentally because all of the group's assets are already pledged to a secured creditor. There is no ability to grant security to any other party without the consent of that existing lender, who has already continued to support the business over the last 3 months and for the period well before that. I do question also the timing for that exercise to be effective had we indeed been able to achieve that as a result. The next question: are we going into administration? I emphasize that the PLC entity, the company at the top of the Harland & Wolff group, will proceed into administration. We filed a formal notice of intention to appoint administrators on the 17th, on Tuesday, the 17th of September. And as we previously advised, administrators will be appointed from the firm of Tenio in the coming days. I emphasize that the yards particularly continue to trade under the control of their directors and have funding to continue to trade for the time being. What does the future hold for Harland & Wolff? That's clearly a very open question. For me, I think first and foremost, we need to overcome our financial difficulties that everyone is so acutely aware of at the moment. And I'm confident that we can do that. Thereafter, I see moving into new strong ownership will be the best way forward to deliver that objective of 15 million hours over the 4 yards. For me, strong ownership brings leadership, a strong covenant. It brings a benefit of systems and know-how that will greatly benefit the business. And it will improve Harland & Wolff's work-winning capability through its bid program, with having a stronger covenant behind it. I do think that there is a need for operational improvements and performance across the yards, and I'm sure that those can be easily addressed under a new leadership team. And I do continue to believe that there is a bright future for the yards under new ownership. The next question is: what is the expected total cost to Harland & Wolff to pay the appointed administrator? That's a difficult question to answer. I can just give a couple of observations on that. Firstly, we have paid them a retainer of £50,000 as part of their preliminary work to do their contingency planning and prepare for the company's appointment. I would note that the administrator is an officer of the court, and it's a highly regulated environment. The administrator, I know, will make reports and provide updates to stakeholders, creditors and shareholders on a periodic basis. And there will be full transparency in accordance with their own regulations about how much the cost of the process has reached. The next question is: what is the valuation range being placed on Ireland McGee? I can't give an insight into that. I'm sure within the company's books, the particular accounts for the Ireland McGee, there is a book value on that at the moment, but that is one of the assets that's being handled through our sales process with Rothschild. So we will have to wait and see what value might be derived for that asset. The next question, is there any truth in the rumour that an Australian billionaire was interested in providing additional funds? And was this considered as a serious option before moving to administration? I think I've addressed that point about how we've interacted with all of the interested parties who have approached us as being interested in some or all of the parts of the business.
Shall we turn to the questions that have been posted in the last few minutes? I'll just run through them in the order that they were posted. The first one, as directors, you have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the company. Bearing this in mind, why did you not wait for the Rothschilds to complete their strategic review before moving towards administration?
The answer to that is we thought long and hard about the decision we had to take, and ultimately it became the inevitable conclusion that given the company's insolvency on both a balance sheet and a cash flow basis, that actually it was the right thing to do to proceed into administration. That, whilst that brings about the end of in all likelihood, the end of the company's trading in shares, it does not preclude the fact that shareholders still own the company, and the administrator in due course will provide a full account, as I said, of the value realised and how that is ultimately attributed to the PLC stakeholders. So for my part, we kept the business going as long as we can, but in the context of the difficult choices we've had and the immediacy of demands for payment by creditors that we were getting, we took the view, difficult as it is, particularly for shareholders, in the context of trying to achieve the best outcome for the 4 yards and the wider business as a whole, that was a decision that we had to take.
The next one, are there investigations of fraud against the prior CEO and CFO?
Yeah, we've made our position clear in the context of the investigations underway, and I can't give any more comment on that at this point.
The next question, originally I came on board because of the Island McGee project. What is going to happen to that? Needless to say, I'm very upset by what has happened, as I will lose £2,500.
So the Island McGee project is owned by the business. It's slightly separate from the 4 entities that hold each of the yards, and that, as I've said, is also included within the Rothschilds process. So we will wait and see, and I will provide an update, as I've said, when I'm able to. But we are seeking expressions of interest of that, as we are indeed for all of the other assets of the group. In terms of the £2,500, assuming that's what you've invested, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for the administrator to give an indication of what if anything might be recovered. But as the directors said in their RNS announcement, it was our conclusion that we didn't feel that there would be any value ultimately attributed to the company's shares.
The next question, if the yards are successfully sold onto a new owner or owners, will some of those funds be returned to us long-term shareholders?
Yeah, so as I said just now, the company, the shareholders, the company continues to be owned by its shareholders, and so as and when the underlying businesses are sold, then value will flow through the group in accordance with its relevant priorities, dealing with the secured creditor, dealing with any other creditors, and ultimately potentially arriving up at the PLC entity. So we will have to wait and see, and it will fall to the administrators to give you an answer to that question in due course.
Okay. Next question. Why aren't you selling other yards and other assets to finance Belfast and maintain the FSS contract? and therefore keep the company going?
Yeah. So we put the business from July. We appointed Rothschilds as part of the strategic options analysis to look for investment and look for parties that might be interested in investing or buying parts of the group. Clearly, that takes some time to prepare a business plan, to prepare a data room, to engage with counterparties. And we certainly don't want to rush that, because I think we'd all accept that having an orderly process, which is competitive, is the way to get the best value. So for my part, I continue to believe that holding the group together is the way to drive the best value for all stakeholders. And so that's the strategy that we have followed.
Okay. The next question is about Scilly Ferries. What due diligence and planning was done with regards to the Scilly Ferries operation as a cash generator for the business? It has been well publicised that the previous management was highly distracted by this, and it seems to have been a major factor in losing UKEF and DBT support. Was it worth it? And if not, why accountability? What accountability is there?
I can't really comment on that. My focus has been to look forward, to try and take the business forward, to manage the challenges around trading, and to work with interested parties around a sale transaction. I haven't looked to the past to revisit the rationale for decisions taken previously. I suspect that's something that might fall to the incoming administrator to look at in accordance with his and her responsibilities.
Why were shareholders not asked for capital? Should this not have been at least attempted before placing the PLC into administration?
I think it's one of the things I've looked at is for the year 2022, the business lost about 48 million pounds, and in that year it received 700,000 pounds of capital from shareholders, and its debts increased by 49 million pounds. I think raising capital, of course, was part of the consideration featuring within our strategic options work being done by Rothschilds. But I think as time has moved on, it's become clear that actually that option is falling away, and we're looking more to a sale of the underlying businesses themselves.
Next question. The company has an order for 3 FSS vessels worth circa 700 million pounds. Why is this insufficient to achieve adequate support from lenders, including the UK government?
Yeah, the FSS contract is clearly a really important contract for the business and for the Belfast and Appledore yards in particular. And I know that is really important in the context of promoting ourselves in the discussions for sale that we're having. So I'm sure that will be a key driver as we work with stakeholders to secure our future.
Our next question. Is there any hope for shareholders with frozen funds in the LSE to still extract any of our funds? Additionally, why were the funds frozen so many weeks before an announcement, essentially trapping our investments?
I'm afraid I'm not sure the circumstances of that. I believe the company shares were suspended around the 1st of July, and the impact of that and any failed trades that might have been caught up in that, I'm afraid I can't pass any comment on.
Okay. And the last question, just an administrative question as to whether this recording will be available for listening, which the answer is yes, it will be available shortly after this call.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's questions.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. That indeed is all the questions for today. I don't know if there's any other closing comments before I redirect investors to give you their feedback.
Oh, there is
Yeah.
one more question that's just come in.
Yeah, and
I
I'm
want to
going to
take
make
a few minutes to answer it.
Okay.
We've got time, I think. There were certain historical artifacts transferred during the previous administration. Steps should be taken to make sure they are protected and do not or have not ended up in the wrong hands. I believe a full list exists from previous administrators, some from the Titanic era.
Yeah, I'm aware of some old artifacts, and we will, of course, I know those are safe and will continue to be kept safe. Okay, I'm just going to make some concluding remarks. For me, the team and our advisors, we've been working hard to secure a long-term future for the business, and to me, employment will be at the heart of that. To see a ship and fabrication capability will be at the heart of that strategy on a multi-site, ideally on a multi-site model. It's unfortunate that we've been unable to take all of our stakeholders along this pathway, with the loss of some jobs, unpaid amounts owed to creditors in the PLC, and the administration of the company for shareholders. I myself am sorry for that, but it's been against the drive to secure the best outcome for the yards and the business as a whole that's driven those decisions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. If I could please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback. On behalf of the team from HARLAND WOLFF Group Holdings PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation and wish you all a good rest of your day.